So welcome to this SPLA session. Today we'll cover all the SPLA changes with a special guest, Fien from Microsoft. And the idea is to introduce you all the changes about SPLA and also some CSP changes. Fien, maybe you can share the agenda.
So also from my side, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Anthony, for the quick introduction. I'm Fien. I'm a partner development manager working for Microsoft Belux. I'm based in Luxembourg, so I'm live from the Luxembourgish office, and so I work closely together with our hosting partners, and that's why Arrow has asked me to present you today the changes we have launched in October, which affect our hosting partners. Maybe some practicalities. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. I have a colleague joining the call who can support me in answering them. So do not hesitate to post your questions. And also, of course, Anthony is there to help you. Also, my excuses already. I have a terrible cough, so if I sometimes mute, then that's why. And well, so I propose that we dive in. Yes, we will also send the slides afterwards, so no need for you to take screenshots of every slide. You can just sit back and listening. Voila. So this is the agenda that I have prepared for you. So I'll start with first an introduction of the changes. I'll explain then each change more in detail. So we'll go through the flexible virtualization benefits. We will discuss licensing Windows Server by Virtual Core. And then we will talk about the CSP-Hoster program, followed by a summary and some resources. So as Anthony said, we will send the slides afterwards. Some slides you may recognize from a webinar of my favorite licensing trainer, Louise Ulrich, who gave a 90-minute session about all of these changes. And so voila, we have used some of her slides for this. I've also added a small disclaimer to the slides to indicate that this presentation is really for educational purposes. So it's intended, we have made this to guide you through the changes. It also reflects the situation as it is today, so not necessarily in the future. Changes may occur in the future based on market condition. And so just to say that today's training is not legally binding us, as always, please use official licensing documents like the product use rights, the SPUR and others, so that you have the official wording and official licensing rules. So that's settled. I think we're good to go. I still see attendees coming in, so welcome if you're only joining now. So as you have seen, we have made changes to the licensing rules in early October this year. Pardon. Changes that affect our hosting partners. The changes are really not in SPLA, but they're more on the other programs, on other volume licensing agreements. And before diving into the licensing topic, I will spend 5 minutes on the background of these changes because they are part of a bigger picture. More specifically, on May 18th, we had Brad Smith, our vice president, who visited Brussels and the European Commission to respond to some licensing concerns raised by some of our European cloud providers. And actually, partners had asked Microsoft to simplify licensing and to expand the range of products that can be offered to customers. And in this blog article, the changes were announced to address this feedback. So you have the link on this slide. The first adjustment is the launch of a set of 5 European cloud principles that Microsoft is adopting to run the cloud business across Europe. So I will quickly go through it. It's about making sure that we are meeting European needs and values, making sure that Microsoft has good platform for software developers, The third one is on partnering closer with European cloud providers. So the topic is, you can actually see it under this third point, the topic of today. And the fourth one is on meeting European government's sovereign needs. And then lastly, the fifth one is about Microsoft adapting to European regulations. So as said, today we're zooming in on point 3. So it's really about the fact that we're working more closely together with European cloud providers. We have a European cloud provider team now, and we've also built a local hosting V team, which I'm part of for Benelux. And so point 3, as said, is also about Microsoft expanding the licensing options for cloud providers so that they can more easily host a wide variety, a wide range of Microsoft products on their cloud infrastructure. What needs to be clarified first is that we distinguish 2 different types of partners when talking about these changes. So there are the listed providers, and then there are the authorized outsourcers. The changes that we announced in October apply to authorized outsourcers and not to the listed providers. So who are the listed providers? So basically it's a list of 4 providers. It's Alibaba, Amazon, Google, but also Microsoft, and more specifically Azure. And so the changes that I'm presenting today are not applicable to the listed providers. What is an authorized outsourcer? The authorized outsourcers are those that are not listed, so it's basically everyone else. We can also call it hosting partners or data center providers or infrastructure partners. Basically, it's all the same thing for us. They are organizations who host things for customers. And the changes of today, the changes that I'm explaining today, are for these authorized outsourcers that offer hosting solutions on their servers or on the servers of a partner. The name authorized outsourcer is not so well chosen because any outsourcer is already authorized. So to avoid confusion, there's no action from you to become authorized. Everyone in this call is authorized. So what are the major licensing changes? So there are 3 things that happened on October 1st of this year. There's a new licensing benefit, and by that we mean a software assurance benefit. There is a new licensing option, and there's a new licensing program. So drilling a bit more in detail, the new licensing benefit is called the Flexible Virtualization Benefit. It is going to allow customers flexibility in their virtualization, as the name says. The new licensing option has to do with Windows Server, and it's an option to license it by Virtual Core. And then there's a new program, a CSP-Hoster program, which I will also explain at the end. So these are all the things that happened in October. So again, to avoid confusion, it's good to state that there are no changes happening in SPLA licensing itself at the moment. The changes happen in the product use rights of the other licensing programs. So that concludes the introduction and the background of the changes. Now let's look into detail of each of the 3 topics, starting with flexible virtualization benefit. So what is this flexible virtualization benefits? Well, I've pasted here on my slides the universal license terms. Say that it's customers with subscription licenses or licenses with active software assurance, including CALs. They may use licensed copies of the software on devices, including shared servers that are under the day-to-day management and control of authorized outsourcers. So in human language, this means that customers can now, for the first time, take their licenses to multi-tenant and shared places of authorized outsourcers. And customers could already bring licenses to dedicated environments via programs as license mobility, but now customers can also bring them to shared environments, and that is really something new. It's the case for all Microsoft software available as subscriptions or as license where software assurance is included, but I will be focusing on a couple of products, specifically to start with Windows Server, as it's a big change. So let's review and analyze what is changing here with the help of this table. So on top, you see the options to outsource to either a dedicated environment or a shared environment. And then for each of the environments, you've got customer-owned, authorized outsourcers, listed providers, Azure dedicated host, and in shared, we have Azure, authorized outsourcers again, and listed providers again. And then here, I'm gonna maybe quickly use my laser pointer, then you can follow me. So how can you buy Windows Server? You can buy just a license via CSP or volume licensing. You can buy a license with software assurance via volume licensing, and you can also buy Windows Server as a software subscription in CSP in a 1-year or a 3-year subscription. So far, so good. I hope this is clear. Now let's take a look at the options that customers have. So what is standard included when you buy a license? When you buy a license in whatever form, the standard rule is that you can use it on your own dedicated environments, and so also on authorized outsourcers' dedicated solutions. In fact, you can take all of your licenses to an authorized outsourcer dedicated environment. So that's not something new. These options is something that's already existed. Also, license mobility principle is not something that is new, but there are no checks in the boxes because license mobility is not available for Windows Server. Let's take a look at Azure Hybrid Benefits. So it's applicable when you have got a Windows Server with software assurance or a Windows Server software subscription, and you can, as you probably know, use it in an Azure environment. So that's what it's built for. And then let's take a look at a new licensing option for Windows Server, so the flexible virtualization benefits. I'm quickly clicking. So this is very specific for the authorized outsourcers. So launched in October this year, flexible virtualization rights allow you to take your licenses to authorized outsourcers and in shared solutions. So that is new. So to summarize, in a dedicated environment, well, there were not a lot of limitations. You can use volume licensing with or without software assurance, and you can use CSP licenses except on these listed providers' hardware. And then in the shared environment, yes, what is really new is a flexible virtualization benefit that allows you to take your licenses to an outsourcer. So that is for Windows Server. I hope this one is clear because we will be using the same image for the other products. So for you authorized outsourcers in the call, you should then focus on these options if you're hosting from your own servers or from a partner data center. A quick look into the eligibility requirements. So this is really, these are the rules of the on-premise licensing that will also translate to your environment. So what licenses are eligible? It is about licenses with software assurance included. And it's about licenses, license subscriptions that you have bought through CSP. You still need to own 16 core licenses, so you still need to have at least 16 cores in your licensing portfolio. Pardon, but you need at least 8 cores per virtual machine. And so as said, the Windows Server usual on-premise licensing rules remain active. So it means that you also need client access licenses. Let's take a look at SQL Server now and flexible virtualization benefits. We're using the same image as for Windows Server again, with a dedicated option and a shared option. For SQL, you have these licensing options. There's license only, so no subscription or software assurance. Then there's license with SA in the core model or in a server and CAL model. And then these are the software subscriptions, which we know are only core licenses. So to make the picture complete, what can customers do with a license? So this in a dedicated environment, as we have seen with Windows Server, you can use it on customer-owned hardware and also on a dedicated authorized outsourcer environment. Then what can be done with license mobility through SA? So you can use it also on your environment, but also on Azure and on listed providers. That hasn't changed. Azure Hybrid Benefit hasn't changed either. What is really new here again is the flexible virtualization benefits. Authorized outsourcers can now use this and welcome these licenses on shared environments. Again, a quick word on the eligibility. It is any license with software assurance in a core model or in a server and CAL model. It's also software subscriptions, but through CSP. And the licenses may have been acquired at any time, same as with Windows Server. They may have been acquired before October 1st, but as of October 1st, customers are allowed to use them on your shared environment. And it follows the usual on-premise licensing rules. Then Windows 10 and Windows 11. So the flexible virtualization benefit also applies to Windows 10 and 11. There are different ways customers may choose to buy the licenses to allow them to install Windows 10 or 11. So it could be a user license, a user subscription license, or device licenses. You would use those when you have a qualifying operating system. It could be VDA. You use these when you don't have a qualifying operating system, or it could be Microsoft 365 E3, E5, or F3 when you don't just want to buy Windows, but you also want the apps as well. And so all of these are eligible for the flexible virtualization benefits, and it is now only these licenses, Windows 11 Enterprise licenses that require a qualified operating system. So this is clearly something very different, that you can now take these licenses to run on authorized outsourcers infrastructure, and that's how the flexible virtualization benefit works for the Windows clients. Before this option was only possible if you were one of the rare authorized qualified multi-tenant hosters. So some partners in the call might be aware of this. It's a QMTH amendment, so only those type of partners were allowed to do this. Now you don't need an amendment to your SPLA contract anymore. You don't need to sign anything in order to do this. Let's take a look at Microsoft 365 apps. So before flexible virtualization, customers could not deploy Microsoft 365 apps to a cloud provider's data center unless they had, as I said, this QMTH authorization. So that was really a severe limitation for a lot of our SPLA partners. But the good news is that you can now, as you will see on my slides, you can now also use CSP licenses or even volume licenses on your shared environment. So Microsoft 365 apps, so I'm really talking about Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on, may now be deployed with any authorized outsourcer. So you see that there are quite a lot of options for customers that have Microsoft 365 licenses. I've also added a link to the Microsoft 365 shared computer activation, because when deploying Microsoft 365 apps software on shared devices or servers, then shared computer activation must be used. And so to use shared computer activation, you need an Office 365 or Microsoft 365 plan that includes Microsoft 365 apps. So you will read more about this on this link. Some frequently asked questions. I haven't looked at the chat, but maybe some of these have already been asked in the chat. So I'll quickly go through them. So does flexible virtualization now replaces license mobility through software assurance? So license mobility remains intact, but it's now the only way for listed providers to welcome certain licenses. I have already covered the second one also in the slides. Do customers still need client access licenses when using flexible virtualization rights? So yes, customers must prove that they have enough eligible Windows Server CALs with software assurance or bought through CSP. Do we still need a QMTH amendment? So indeed, a good question. QMTH was made redundant because Microsoft has now expanded these hosting rights for Office 365 and Windows 11 to all service providers. So I'll come back to this point later, but existing QMTH partners can continue to continue with the program, stop the program, or move to CSP-Hoster, which we will cover in a minute. Can I mix SPLA and bring your own license on Windows Server? So I haven't included an official statement or answer here, so that's why I'm calling it things to consider. And I've seen in the chat a question also on SPLA. Yes, in the previous images, I haven't included SPLA specifically as an option. As I said, there are no changes to SPLA. So yes, on shared environments, you still are allowed to use SPLA licenses. So Cedric, I hope that answers your question. So going back to my slide, so things to consider: mixing SPLA and bring your own licenses or volume licensing on the same server. As said, there's no really official statement, but our guidance is that you should not mix them in the same cluster. Of course not, especially not for Windows Server, because it can create a licensing mess, a mixture that it's hard to imagine working smoothly. So if a host is already licensed with Windows Server Data Center in SPLA, it might not be interesting to welcome Windows Server plus SA licenses. And of course, some providers may opt for deploying an entirely new infrastructure for Windows Server, bring your own licenses, but it might not be a really feasible solution for many of you, as it would mean a new investment and restructuring your cloud environments, changes to the billing systems, and so on. So for Windows Server, it's not recommended. Then a point around bring your own licensing, compliancy, and license verification. So if a customer is coming to you and wants to use his volume licensing or CSP licenses, for the moment there's no verification obligation. There's no reporting obligation, but the advice is to start verifying it anyway, so that in case of an audit, you can prove that the customer has the correct licenses. So you could extract a screenshot from the CSP portal, from the volume licensing portal, a Microsoft statement proves that there are licenses active via CSP or via volume licensing with SA. And it might also be an idea to track the expiration date and reach out proactively to the customer. And it's maybe even an opportunity to do a commercial offer via CSP or SPLA once the customer needs to renew licenses. I see the questions are coming in. That's a good thing. So then going to the second big change, which can be linked to the first change, is that you're now, not you, but customers are now allowed to license Windows Server based on individual virtual machines. Previously, Windows Server was licensed by physical core, which means that customers needed to have access to the physical server hardware to ensure that they had enough Windows Server licenses to cover all physical cores in a machine. With virtual core licensing option, customers can now choose to license Windows Server by the number of virtual cores they are using in the VM. So it makes really Windows Server licensing easier when virtualizing or going to an authorized outsourcer. So let's take a look at this. So licensing options for Windows Server. So there are two options here again. Just a second. Yeah, so these are the two options: licensing by physical server, licensing by virtual machine. When can you license by physical server? This was already allowed and realistic to do so, normal to do so on a dedicated option, customer-owned environment or an authorized outsourcer. In a shared environment, it does not always make sense to license by physical cores. And so that is why virtual core licensing was announced for Windows Server. So remember the flexible virtualization benefits with SA or software subscriptions. Customers can take their licenses to authorized outsourcers and then choose now to license per virtual core. So if a customer wants to run a lot of virtual machines, then licensing the physical cores may be a good option. If a customer just wants to run a couple of virtual machines, they don't have to license the whole physical server. So the change is made in the on-premises licensing as announced in the beginning, but this also translates to the authorized outsourcers environment. Then licensing eligibility. So we're still talking about Windows Server license by virtual core. What is the license eligibility rule? The licenses must be either Windows Server Standard or Data Center Core licenses with SA, with software assurance, or CSP subscriptions for Windows Server Standard or Data Center. There is also a minimum of 16 core licenses required, and licenses may have been acquired at any time by the customer, also before October 1st. So we know it's going to apply to authorized outsourcers solutions. Again, there's a minimum of 8 cores per virtual machines. You do need client access licenses. They must also be covered by software assurance or must be bought through a subscription. Same rules apply for data center and standards, and the licenses must match the edition that is installed. A new notion is about the relaxed reassignment rules. So these virtual core licenses may travel with the virtual machine from host to host freely. So that's also a big change and a big benefit, I believe. So we called it relaxed reassignment rules. Frequently asked questions. I haven't seen questions about virtual core benefits coming in yet, but it may come. So can SPLA partners license virtual machines per core? So no, there were no changes made to SPLA. licensing per core is available to customers with CSP subscriptions or licenses with SA. Can I combine flexible virtualization benefits with licensing Windows Server per core? Yes, you can. So flexible virtualization benefits allows a customer to take their licenses to authorized outsourcers, and it would be, of course, a bit ridiculous asking customers to license per server, per physical core model. So it's important to know that you can combine these options. What is the minimum number of licenses required to benefit from virtual core licenses? I've already mentioned it. It's 8, but you need to have 16 in your portfolio. So you need 8 core licenses per virtual machine, but you need to have in your portfolio 16 licenses. Can I license SQL Server by virtual core? This was already allowed since a long time. So this is, I think, a rather easy change. And now to conclude it, we have the famous CSP-Hoster program. So first of all, to become a CSP-Hoster, you need to be enrolled in the CSP-Hoster program. So you need to take an action. So, but first, let's take a look at what this CSP-Hoster program is and how it works to see if this is something you would want to enroll in. So participation in the CSP-Hoster program allows you to pre-build hosted solutions for your end customers using your activation keys and your installation media that Microsoft makes available through the Volume Licensing Service Center portal. So please do pay attention to this bold sentence here that is about your activation keys and your installation media. It's not about your licenses. So the licenses are still owned by the customers. In the language of the CSP-Hoster program guide, CSP hosters are allowed to offer 2 types of services. So you can sell the CSP-Hoster licenses bundled with your hosted services, which we call license included. And the other type is bring your own license. In this case, you are hosting services for clients with eligible licenses. And as we have seen, eligible licenses are licenses with software assurance and subscription licenses. Note that participation in the CSP-Hoster program is not a requirement to provide any of these 2 services, as we have just seen. So you can already welcome licenses on your own environment today if the customer has software assurance and subscription licenses. So the real advantage of becoming a CSP-Hoster is actually about the ability to pre-build solutions using your own CSP keys. And you could also, for example, roll out your own solution marketplace from which your end customers may order these pre-built solutions. And that is because you have access to the installation media and activation keys, which aren't available to other providers. So therefore, this is an advantage. So other non-CSP-Hoster providers must obtain media and keys from their end clients, their end customers. And so it might make the solution roll out slower than with CSP-Hosters. And then, of course, you need to check if it's you that will provide the license or if it's the customer that is coming over with an eligible license. So just repeating that, in order to welcome licenses with software assurance, in order to welcome subscription licenses or to license Windows Server by Virtual Core, what we have just covered, you don't need to be a CSP-Hoster. CSP-Hosters only have today this specific benefit that they can access that they can use their activation keys and installation media. So currently, the program is limited to SPLA partners with an existing QMTH status, which are typically also indeed direct CSP partners. I think someone asked the question on chat. So as a reminder, these QMTH partners were those partners that were allowed to host Office 365 and Windows on a shared environment before the 1st of October. Plans are to expand it to all partners later in a second stage. So if you're wondering when it is coming to indirect partners, that's what you see here on the right-hand side in the future. So partner requirements, we have covered that. Program requirements, you need to sign an amendment for CSP-Hoster. You still need to report monthly the number of licenses, the number of license included customers, plus the bring your own license customers, and there is a license verification for bring your own license services. What about my QMTH contract? So if you have a QMTH amendment which is active today, there's no change. As said, you can continue to use it if you want. And if, or you can also stop it, or when you have the QMTH renewal, then it's the perfect moment to make a choice. But please note that if you stop the QMTH, or if it expires, you do not longer have your entry ticket for a CSP-Hoster. So that's still a requirement today. I assume you have a lot of questions about this, so I've tried to foresee them. So is the CSP-Hoster program replacing QMTH? Yes and no is the answer. So QMTH is no longer a requirement to host Windows 11 and Office 365 apps, and that's the only value of QMTH. But for the moment, QMTH will remain. So if you want to continue with this program, there's no rush to terminate it. Do remember that it's your entry ticket for CSP-Hoster today. Is CSP-Hoster replacing SPLA? No, the SPLA program continues to exist, and SPLA providers may continue to use it for their business as usual. Is CSP-Hoster required to host CSP licenses for end clients on your shared environment? So no, unless you're a listed provider, you may allow your end customers to bring their subscription licenses to your shared and also dedicated hosting platforms. You don't need to be a CSP-Hoster for this to work. And then we are coming to the summary. So we're almost at the end now. I hope you have all understood the changes. I am unfortunately not able to follow all of the questions, but I see that Jan and Anthony are busy replying to them. So you're probably wondering, what does this all mean for me in my situation? And actually, to summarize, the biggest opportunity that we see is the expanded choice that you and your customers have. So there's no one size fits all. We believe that these are additional options and that it is a positive thing. So you might maybe wonder, what's the use of SPLA? Well, SPLA is not changing. If you love SPLA, if SPLA works for you, then you can, of course, continue to use this. If you have however, found gaps in what you can offer to customers in the past before October 1st, then hopefully you have seen today some changes that fill those gaps. So we also see that this authorized outsourcer thing is simplifying things, even if explaining it might be sounding a bit complex, but you don't have to worry anymore about whether the environment is dedicated or shared. You don't have to worry about what the products are. There are options for every product and for every environment. And so to help you, I have made a small summary. I've made you an image that can hopefully help to give you a view on all of these options. And so this is the view that shows you what options you have when you are an authorized outsourcer, who is of course not using the listed providers environment. So as you know, these are excluded. So you can use SPLA, a set that is business as usual. You can use CSP subscriptions, as you have seen. This is called flexible virtualization benefits. You can use volume licensing with software assurance, also called flexible virtualization benefits. And some of you today can sign up for CSP-Hoster. And as you have seen, you can use your own keys, but the customer licenses still need to come through CSP or through their volume license agreement. So this is your choice to go for one or the other or a combination. That will be something that you will have to decide for yourselves based on factors as cost and your current setup. Of course, we are here to help you with this exercise and with this decision if you would like to. Now let's take a quick look at if you're a partner providing services on an Azure environment. So you may bring some SPLA licenses to Azure, the SAL licenses, but as you might have read, we will remove this ability to outsource SPLA licenses to listed providers. So there's a 3-year period for this until September 2025. At the end of which providers will have to stop using SPLA licenses with listed providers. You can also bring your own SQL and Windows Server licenses to Azure through the Azure Hybrid Benefits. You can bring more licenses via license mobility through SA. Some might be brought. Good to check the documentation. And as we have seen, we have Microsoft 365 apps and Windows 10 and 11. So I hope this view is helping you to have a summary of all your options. Again, if you need our help and the help of Arrow in making this decision, we are building together a decision tree to make it even easier for you to decide what the best option is for you. So don't hesitate to reach out to both of us. And this actually concludes my presentation. I have some extra resources for you. So the first one is the recording of Louise Ulrich. She has given a session in September around these changes. So you can register and listen to the recording. We also have a collection of resources here. As you see, we have frequently asked questions, a training deck, the partner blog, and so on. So do make use of these. There is also an update coming from Arrow around SPLA pricing, so stay tuned about this. And then, of course, I have mentioned here our friends at Arrow that are also there to support you with all of these complex licensing topics. With this, I'm giving the word back to you, Anthony. In the meantime, I'll take a look at the questions in the chat.
Yeah, a lot of questions, so which is good. So thank you for everyone. Like I've mentioned to some of you, if you have to leave or if you couldn't attend this session, you will have the possibility to either you scan the QR code straight away now, or you will be able to scan afterwards. And to complete the form to be contacted by one of my Arrow colleagues, and to set up a one-to-one meeting to go through your specific business case. Feel free also to either scan the QR code or to directly send an email or contact your preferred Arrow contact. And about the SPLA pricing update, you will receive soon, either this week or next one, the newsletter about the prices change for next year.
Great. I'm going through the questions, but I think we have covered all of them. Also, my apologies for my cough during the presentation. I have a permanent cold since November. So my apologies for that. Okay, well, thank you all for your presence. I think we are still staying in the call to reply to the last questions. So feel free to post them in the chat during the last 9 minutes of the call, and then we'll take the time to reply in the chat. Thank you all for joining, and see you soon.
Thank you to everyone.